This is Pet Business Disruptors. I'm Clayton and I'm here today with Michelle Hollis, who is a member of the Raw Feeding Veterinary Society and a veterinary nurse. How's it
Hello.
going? You're right.
Yeah.
So, main reason I wanted to speak to you today is because obviously coming from a pet industry background, raw feeding has become a major part of the industry, especially amongst the pet specialist trade. But at the same time, I also have friends who work in teaching nutrition to veterinary surgeons who are also highly against raw feeding. So just let me know where you're coming from and why you broke the mold, because you're people vets who are big into raw feeding are unusual for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose it all started when I took home my working cocker spaniel. She's never worked a day in her life, but I took her home when she was 10 weeks old after being signed over. And I was looking at all this nutrition. She had the typical runny stools, and I just wanted to feed the best that's out there for her. So looked at loads of different foods that are out there. Obviously went with your commercial veterinary brands and didn't help. If anything, there was a lot more runny poo. Um, and then I started researching raw feeding, and it literally took over my life. And she's been on raw food ever since, and absolutely brilliant stools, as gross as it sounds. And she's never been wormed either, and never had any worms. So overall, her skin and coat's beautiful, and her teeth are amazing. We all know that periodontitis comes quite early for a lot of our animals nowadays, but her teeth are beautiful.
Yeah, so obviously I've been in the industry since I was a kid, and although I might not look it, that's actually a long time ago. And so I actually saw the transformation of pet stores going from being sort of dominated by selling things like frozen tripe with terrier
Mm-hmm.
biscuit, and then you would sell a supplement like a seaweed powder, or there used to be a product called SA37, which was a generalized multivitamin, which would go with it. And then I saw the move into kibble, which was really accelerated through companies like Eukanuba. Um, and it then got knocked out of the market totally, and an average pet shop then would barely sell frozen meat at all. And it's interesting to see how it's come back, but obviously, I mean, I kind of look at it that if you're just from a logical perspective, it just seems like a more natural diet. But obviously, I'm not a dog nutritionist. I'm somebody who's learned some dog nutrition based on needing to find unique selling propositions for my products. But, so it's interesting to see how that's changed. But I do think there's so many different types of raw dog food types out there now. And obviously, you have what you would consider to be the complete foods, but then you also have 80-10-10s, which are also marketed as complete, and then you also have complementaries, which are obviously not. So, would you see all raw food as equal, or do you have particular sort of knowledge patterns on the different types?
Definitely. So the complimentary, where you'll get your boneless mince, you'll get your offal. That is more for those that are okay with doing their own DIY food. But again, you would need to do all the research. You would need to at least have your 80% meat, your 10% offal, which 5% needs to be liver, and then your 10% bone. However, you are missing out on a lot of nutrients if you're not including vegetables and fruits. You've also got your added fiber there as well. A lot of cases that we see in clinic are where they've got a high percentage of bone, and they're having that quite regularly, and then they get constipated and you get blockages and things like that, which then on the other side does not help with the vets that see these cases and blame the raw feeding. So it is looking at the percentages on some of the brands and also adding in the fruit and veg. It's, especially with the cost of living, it's a good way to lower the price as well.
I mean, when I talk to people who are obviously anti-raw feeding, they always talk to me about the bacterial load as well. That like that's one thing. Like, if you when you feed raw, you got the bacterial load, so it gets on your hands when you're feeding, and then when it comes out the other end, it makes the after effects more like problematic. I mean, like, what would you say to that? I mean, is that a thing, or is it not, in your opinion?
It depends. So obviously there's so many brands out there. That there's Raw Safe, which is an accredited brand where it's actually the same vets that are used in human food that go around and test these manufacturers. It's still quite small, so there's not many brands that are part of the Raw Safe accreditation. But you also have your UK pet food that have started a certificate, which also go around and test certain manufacturers, and they get that accreditation with them. But it's also basic hygiene. You're not going to cook your Sunday roast and handle your raw chicken and then go and lick your face or something like that, or or lick your hands. And it's just basic hygiene. It's making sure that your dog food's not kept on the top shelf of the fridge so that it's dripping onto the other food. It's just a little bit of common sense. And if anything, I do think as long as you're going with those reputable brands that have got those certificates and the accreditation, and you are defrosting it in the fridge slowly and as they tell you to do, then you're less likely to get any infection compared to other processed dog foods. So it's just basic hygiene and common sense.
So another sort of thing that gets bandied around is obviously, I'm feeding raw, let's say, and then I forget to take my meat out. Like, people like to band around the idea that you can't then switch to kibble and then switch back, because there was obviously a lot of talk about that you need to then feed cold press rather than kibble. But I mean, I've done some level of research on it, and there's actually new research coming out saying that a small amount of raw food with kibbles actually improves your dog's gut biome. I mean, do you have an opinion on that side of it, or like what people can do if they forget?
I mean, obviously, if they have kibble and they are mixing, it is a myth. The acid in the dog's stomach is going to digest that food, regardless of whether it's mixed with raw meat, for example. It's going to work. The only difference is you're going to get a lot of poop with the kibble. But yeah.
It's really funny. Like, honestly, if you go into, I would say, a lot of pet shops and just say to them, can I feed raw with kibble? I guarantee you most of them, because there's been like a consistent flow of information that raw and kibble together are a no-no, So, and like I say, it's only that I actually looked at scientific papers and I was like, because I was under the impression that raw with cold pressed dog food, kibble, what was I was told? It was like it digests at different rates, and if you put them together, it's a problem. But actually, the most recent research I read was like 10% raw with kibble is actually beneficial. So,
the kibble's always going to take longer. There's lots of videos out there with cold press compared to kibble where they've popped them in glasses of water, and you see the difference with cold press compared to kibble. Kibble just floats for ages. So, if anything, your kibble is going to be the backfiring log, as it were, when it comes out.
But again, it's like I've seen all those where they'll put like kibble in water, but it's not a realistic test, right? I mean, because when the dog eats it, the dog's stomach is filled with water.
It's gone as well.
I've never met a dog that's got like water in their stomach, and if they do, they probably should go and visit the vet. To be honest, So in terms of like feeding a balanced raw food, I mean, what would your advice be? Would you say use something like raw aid, like one of the raw aids? Because I know obviously companies like Nutriment do a raw aid, which is an addition to the raw. Or would you say look for a more holistic brand? Because I believe obviously there's raw foods on the market which already have the vegetables and fruits already blended in. Or would you advocate for like people self making their own sort of addition to raw food?
I mean, if they have the time to do DIY, that's absolutely amazing, because you know where you're sourcing your products from. Me personally, I just don't have the time. So with Ruby, she will get alternate days. So she'll have an 80-10-10 where she's got like her keepers mix and her greens, which I add into it. And then the other day I will do like a veg mixed one. And then there's my supplement graveyard where I'll just add whatever whenever. Um, so it's making sure that, like, variety is key. Like we don't sit down every night and have a completely balanced meal. It just wouldn't taste nice, and
No.
and it just never happens. So as long as you're doing different meats, different offals, obviously still with 5% liver, then you're getting that variety, whether it's over the month or over a week. Regardless, you're just getting that variety in there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually. It's funny you say about supplements because I'm like big into like obviously the pet industry at the moment is there's big moves towards supplements and like people actually again because it's like with dog food products, you'll quite often have, let's say on the bag, made with with glucosamine and chondroitin that have like 300
Mm.
micrograms when actually you need 1800 to actually have any like realistic effect. So there's definitely a move towards people actually like self-supplementing and just saying, looking at brands and going, I don't care what it says about this because I'm just going to add my own. Like,
Mm.
what do you use? Like, what do you recommend? What do you think are the good ones out there at the moment? Because obviously, there's a lot to choose from. I mean, I know things like pumpkin powder are massively in vogue at the moment in terms of as a prebiotic. Seaweed powder is making a comeback.
Yeah.
When I didn't see seaweed on the powder on pet store shelves for like 20 years, I'd say. I mean, it was big in the 80s up until the mid 90s, and then obviously with the strength of the kibble market, it just sort of disappeared. So what are your go-tos for yourself, but also what would you recommend more widely?
Um. So obviously, if you're on a raw meat, like meaty bone diet, then technically things like your well, I won't name them, but the ones with your glucosamine and your and all those sort of joint supplements, that's already in your raw meaty bone. Like, you've got all that in there, and if they're an older animal and you've not long been on the raw diet, then yeah, that's absolutely fine to supplement with things like joint support and stuff. Um, Personally, with my older dogs, I add a little bit of green lipped mussel powder in there, extract. There's goat milk powders. Bone broth is a really good one. That's got all your glucosamine and everything in there that a bone would have, especially if you haven't got a raw fed dog that's, you wanting to get that into them. Bone broth is brilliant, even when they're poorly as well. It just gives them a little bit of oomph, to get through some illness. If they suffer from a long chronic illness like pancreatitis, bone broth is a perfect option there. Um, I'm a bit of a herbal supplement kind of gal, so I do have a lot of my homeopathy immunity liquids and things that I add in there. I've got they're all entire as well, so I do have a little oil. It's called Moody Bitch, which is perfect. So I do add that in when they are getting to that point and they're a little bit feisty. Uh, so yeah, I've got so many supplements. It's
Yeah,
unreal.
but I think it's interesting. I mean, I'm like loving the sort of resurgence of the supplement market, to be honest, because we just seem to move so far away from it. Like 10, 15 years ago, we'd seem to move so far in the direction of everybody trying to pack everything into a kibble and not doing a great job of it. That
Yeah.
I'm actually loving the fact that we've moved back away from the marketing. And I put a lot of this down to like social media sites like TikTok and influencers
Hmm.
and people just coming on and just like laying out information and the sort of regrowth of a knowledge economy, as opposed to, you know, expecting a bag to tell you what you need. I mean, so no, I mean, and like I say, I think it is catching on. I think like more and more stores are increasing their supplement range, and I think people are demanding it more. So I think that's good. Um,
But also, don't worry if you can't do the pretty little plate where they've got in the little sections of the beehive style plate. Like mine never looks like that. It's all just a mess, and
like
they still eat it.
I literally just throw mine on top of their meat and just chuck it down.
Yeah.
I mean, they just eat it. I mean, it's fine. You know, it's like I'm just like squirt, fling.
I haven't got the time for that. The dog's constantly barking because she wants it now.
And it's funny as well. I think like, I mean, I'd like supplements obviously to do more in terms of actually just like educating people as to what they need. I mean, it was funny, obviously, like cod liver oil versus salmon oil was always like one of my sort of things where if you went to a normal pet store and said, yeah, what should I give, cod liver oil or salmon oil? No one would ever give you the right answer, because like cod liver oil, it contains a type of omega acid, which is great for, let's say, developing brains, but the carnivorous fish like salmon and sardine is great for like joints and stuff. And I think like brands generally need to work harder to really like push through the knowledge into the stores, because obviously people are relying on vets, or they're relying on pet stores, and obviously pet store information is like the free information which you don't want to go to your vet for, if you know what I mean. So it's down
Mm,
to pet stores to really like get behind it and actually train people stronger to do it. So
yeah, definitely.
let's sort of sidestep a little bit, like, because obviously you're a proponent of like raw feeding. How's your feeling towards things like natural dog treats compared to, let's say, the more manufactured ones?
I always stick with natural dog treats. Don't get me wrong, like if someone's wanting to give my dogs a gravy bone as a treat, then fine, like it's not going to hurt a one off. But in terms of dental hygiene, they will get a tendon or like a dried out kind of body part. um, so it's just, you know what it is. The only thing is you do have to read the packet, because a lot of them, they are mixed with things, and if there's things that are added in there for like a pig's ear, for example, it's kind of like, hang on, it's meant to be just a pig's ear. So you still, for those natural treats, have to be careful, because it may look like that but it's not. There's stuff added to it.
Well, I think a lot of that is down to so there's a lot of, let's say, your chicken based treats, which are in there's like everyone's got their own brand of them, and
Hmm.
a lot of them come from China, and so
Yeah.
they use glycerin as an agent to make them like bendy and kind of like preserve them better, because I obviously used to sell natural dog treats, and like if you actually took like a dried chicken breast, like, so we used to buy dry chicken breasts from China, but then also from Europe, like so from Poland, and the dried chicken breast from Poland, it was like pretty solid, would crack, you know, whereas the
Hmm.
Chinese ones are bendy. And look, don't get me wrong, the dogs love them, but again, it's, you know, there's a, you know, people need to be more aware of, obviously, of the origin of where things are coming from. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with like
No.
them, because when stuff comes in from like India or China, they have to be, they're subject to more stringent test screenings than, let's say, European stuff is, or
Yeah.
definitely domestic stuff anyway. But yeah, it's also being aware that, let's say, just because it's a nice looking piece of chicken in a packet, it's not actually just chicken, you know. So
Mm.
what do you make of, like, obviously there's a couple of health claims milling around in the natural tree community. Um, one is which I find accurate, but like is probably overstated, is that of chicken feet being a natural source of glucosamine and great for joint health. What's your opinion? And the second one is rabbit's ears with fur are a natural dewormer. What do you think about those claims?
So chicken feet, my dogs get I've got four. The three little ones, they get a chicken foot twice a week, but raw meaty chicken foot, um, mainly for their dental hygiene. But yes, it's still got bone and cartilage there, so they've got all that benefits from the bone and cartilage, which you would get in like your joint supplements. Yes, it's not as concentrated, but it is a natural method, but it also helps their teeth. Um, in terms of the air dried one, if it's air dried, then and it's not cooked, then yes, it's a good way of getting that same stuff into them. But obviously, there's still a process that it's gone through. So personally, I just stick with the raw meaty chicken feet. Um, Rabbit is, yes, the hair, it's gonna go through the digestive tract. It's gonna push some stuff out, but it's not got any of the anti-worming chemicals, as it were, that would kill off worms. It's just going to drag out and help clear that gut on its way out,
Yeah.
or have it all combined together on the way out.
Well, my opinion is that like the dog's stomach acid pretty much dissolves most of that anyway, right? When as it goes through. So, and again, from my reading, it's like it's great for gut biome, but like
Mm-hmm.
if you're expecting your dog to get wormed by eating a rabbit's ear, you should probably not be told that. Because and again, it's like I don't mind the claim in essence in a sensible fashion that like somebody comes in and says, yeah, there's worming properties there, but if your dog's got worms, like give it a wormer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm always and again, I always think that information should be played to the least intelligent person in the room. Do you know what I mean? because the
Yeah.
because again, it stops confusion. Like and if I say to you, oh, this is natural dewormer, there's a strong chance you go home and go, oh well, I don't need to worm my dog anymore. That's great. I'll just give it some rabbits here. So that'd be awesome. But yeah. And
It's
again,
a great source of zinc as well. So if you've dog's got skin problems, zinc is a really good supplement to have. So any item that's got hair on it or any skin treats, as it were, that's a really good option for your dog with skin issues.
no, awesome. I didn't know that. Like, that's cool. I mean, because obviously, like, and that's the thing. I think, like, playing to the actual real benefits makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Saying it's great source of zinc, it's good for gut biome. That makes more sense than like it's a natural dewormer. Because again, I think it's like a selling proposition. People aren't generally buying treats to worm their dogs, right? Uh, I mean, but I mean, what do you think about? There's a lot more. There's a lot more movement in the treat market as well, with like what they call functional treats. So, for example, like dental sticks with chamomile to help calm, and other treats which, let's say, contain supplements. Like, do you have an opinion on that sort of stuff, or?
Personally, it's kind of like, well, you can get those supplements anyway. So depending on how religious you are with the whole no carbohydrates and grains and no weird chemical made
Uh,
treats, then fine, go ahead. You've got all those supplements in them, and your dog will still eat it. Like, your dog will still enjoy it. But personally, just get those supplements and put them in your dog's food. Um, so you can get so many calming herbal blends that you can just add and things like that. So personally, that's what I do. But if you
no.
want them in a combined stick of God knows what material, then
I,
That's their
I,
prerogative.
I, I think the thing is, I think like a lot of consumers, they always worry that like they kind of want their dogs to enjoy everything. I think a lot of the reason we do stuff is for the health of our dogs, but also for the enjoyment levels of our dogs. So
Yeah.
I can see the rationale behind functional treats. I guess for me personally, it would just be how functional are these functional treats? Is like because it's again it's that same argument with like glucosamine in dog food is it enough to actually like worry about like and again it's like if you're going to do it it needs to be at a level which makes sense for your dog's size and height and also and if you're putting enough in like put on the label just give one a day because like you don't want to overdose them on this so no that's
It's
good.
also how it's processed, though, as well. You've got to remember anything that's cooked at really extreme high temperatures, most of that supplement's going to be destroyed. So it's looking at that as well. And yeah, the dog will enjoy it; it'll eat it anyway. But is it getting the benefit?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like more market. It's a lot more marketing than it is actually like functionality. In reality, is um. So talking about marketing, I'm going to sidestep a little bit over, and like one of my big bugbears of the last sort of 15 years has been like the grain-free kibble revolution. So I remember when it first came in, it just sort of started off with like grain free, and I remember at the time thinking, why would you care about grain free? Like, um, I in my head it was like celiac dogs. That's not really a thing. Um, so like I didn't really get the rationale, but it spread like wildfire, and it kind of it really demonized grains in dog food quite dramatically. And now, sort of like 15 years on, and again, this is always the problem I think with everything new inside the pet industry is that it takes like an entire life cycle of animals to actually get to the roots of whether something's really good or bad. Um, we're starting to hear about like links between grain-free dog food and dilated myocarditis. What's your opinion? Do you have like any opinion on this? And like what's your like obviously explain as well what dilated myocarditis is because you'd know a lot more than me. I'm just reading shit and just spitting it out. So.
So DCM is what you'll see the three letters that anywhere written. It's basically dilated cardiomyopathy. It's where the heart is enlarged as such. So it obviously everything takes harder to beat, and it can be a killer. It's very common in your larger breed dogs, like your Great Danes and things like that. Um, but personally, heart health, you need taurine, and the only way you can get taurine is in muscle meat. So when the whole grain free came in, they were basically saying, because obviously your grain free dog foods that are processed, your kibbles that are grain free, they usually replace the binding agent with legumes like your beans, your chickpeas, things like that. So they were linking that with DCM being the cause. I think it was FDA that did a whole statement with there was a couple of vets that are incidentally on a payroll of a commercial pet brand. And then I think Mars had actually bought out Origin, the
Yeah.
biggest grain free. And FDA quickly retracted their statement saying there's no evidence that grain free is linked with DCM. So it is a very big scandal, and it's gone a bit hush hush now, and there's nothing out there now because the reason they did it was because obviously grain free brands just killed the pet trade. They were the rulers of everything. Everyone wanted grain free. So that's why they originally brought it out. And then obviously one of the biggest brands bought out one of the biggest grain-free brands. So yeah, it's kind of gone on the back burner now.
Yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
again, it's like, and like hypoallergenic, for example, is something people band around a lot, and they try and link it to grain free, but like it's like things like legumes, like peas, and have like long term allergenic properties to the best of my knowledge. Not that I'm a vet or anything, but and again, it's like, look, I'm not saying wheat is good. Like for dogs, you shouldn't feed your dogs on a bowl of wheat or corn, let's say, for example. But I don't think it was ever like that problematic, that everybody had to just completely stop. I mean, as a filling agent in a dog food, it I didn't see it as being the worst. And like we did it for so many years without too many problems, that this move where everyone's now using like white potatoes, or you know, legumes like peas, red lentils, that sort of stuff. It didn't really make that much sense. But yeah, it's interesting you say that it's gone quiet, because I heard about this a while ago, and yeah, it's kind of worrying that how there can be corporate
A lot of control.
but it's a horrible thing, right? Big
Yeah.
companies get involved, and that they can definitely push things in different directions. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, it's like the whole origin thing. It's I mean, I look at that as a bag of dog food, and it's always been too rich for my dogs anyway, and I feel like if you're spending that amount of money on the dog food, it seems again overpowered and not probably the best way of doing it. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, personally, with it's too processed for my liking.
yeah.
Regardless of whether it is like your 80/20 or whatever they claim on the packet, it's still, yeah, all the nutrition is just killed.
Yeah, and it's funny as well, like because obviously you're talking about taurine in foods, and like I know there's like now a synthetic taurine which has been around for the last few years, which they're putting into, I know, like vegan cat foods or insect based cat foods, for example. But again, there's no long term studies, right, on the long term effects of like synthetic taurine in these products. I don't know if you've got much knowledge on that, but it kind of, again, it kind of makes me slightly uneasy, to be honest.
Personally, vegan pet food is just, yeah, especially cat food. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
like miserable cats
yeah.
out there, like.
I suppose you got to look at the cat, and you've got to think, if it's an outside cat, then is it getting its natural taurine from all those mice and birds that it's killing? It's,
Well, I always say to people, it's like you can feed dogs on cat food, but you can't feed cats on dog food because of the taurine contents. And it's like
yeah,
you want to know what your cat does. Watch it roll around the mouse, like to stimulate the adrenaline glands, so that it can consume more taurine in its meat. The concept of
yeah.
giving it an insect based dog food. And look, I'm in the insect industry, like, so I'm involved with like soldier fly larvae, but like the concept of giving that to us as cat food, it doesn't make any sense when you look at like.
Mine does like to hunt spiders, but whether that's a whole diet, I think she'd be really annoyed.
Yeah, it's probably just because she's a bit of a psycho, to be honest. Like cats are psychos, man. Like, that's why I'm a dog person. Like,
she just play with it first.
Cats are just stone cold killers and psychos, aren't they? They're just like looking around saying, yeah, like, the only reason they don't try and kill us is because we're too big, right?
Yeah.
If they thought they could have a go, they'd like roll us around on the floor and kill us.
Although they do say if you do die alone and your cat's there, your cat will eat you, whereas your dog won't.
Oh yeah, Oh yeah.
I'm sure my dog would eat me after some time.
He probably wouldn't enjoy it though. Your cat would be all
Well, yeah.
your cat would be straight on that. They'd be like,
Yeah.
I think the speed is like is the concerning thing. I think it's like within 24 hours or something. They're like in there eating your eyeballs and stuff out your head.
Yeah.
So like, is there like any other kind of like if you had like if you wanted somebody to know what your sort of mantra, your pet food sort of like knowledge, if you could pass it on to somebody, like what would it be?
I think if you are seriously looking at going into raw feeding, there's a lot of Facebook groups out there that give you support. There's the biggest one, which I joined when I first started, was Raw Feeding for Dogs Made Simple UK. They've got a whole website as well that's got all this helpful information on there. They've got different calculators as well for how much you should be feeding, how much fish you should be including, what types of fish, loads of manufacturers, also manufacturers that are best suited for different conditions like skin problems and so on and so forth. They also have a massive supplement list on there, and the Facebook group is it's just amazing. There's no judgments. You can discuss things on there. Even I've put really silly, what I thought were silly questions, and they're all just so welcoming. You've also got your Raw Feeding Veterinary Society, which isn't just for vets. Members of the public can join it. They do need the help from members of the public to get that message across to vets. So without the public, we wouldn't be able to do that on there. So please join it. And they've got so much information on their website as well. Especially if your vet is against you feeding it and you've noticed the change in your dog for the better, yet your vet is still like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Just give them some information from the website, and they might act like they're not going to read it, but they will. They will in their own time. So yeah, it's just finding those associations that you can get involved with and spread the word.
No, and I'd like. I think it's interesting, like because obviously the veterinary line is it's become quite rigid, and you probably want to comment on this because I don't want to get you in trouble, but I've always thought there's like a massive there's a massive problem with vets selling dog food generally, just from the perspective that if I went to a doctor and they said to me, "Oh, you're a child, and it needs Heinz baked beans. That's what it needs. It needs Heinz baked beans. If you're not giving it Heinz baked beans, you're not really looking after your child properly." And then you're going to go, "Well, I don't know anything. I'm going to buy Heinz baked beans." And I think like the concept, there's a conflict of interest when dogs sell dog food. Just and I also, I mean, again, you would know better more than me, but I also don't think, I think that while most vets have a decent idea of nutrition, I also think it's not their forte. And again, commercial properties will always rear their ugly head in terms of training programs. Because again, everything's so nuanced, it's very easy for me to say, this is the right thing to do, but we all know that like dogs are like humans. Everyone's got different sensitivities. Some breeds do better on certain things. Some dogs are more susceptible to other things. So just that sort of like it's such a deep question. I dislike. And again, people are people. They look at vets and they go, yeah, these guys, this is where I get my information from, because you're talking to a trained person and they do really, I'm not saying they don't know their stuff, but I just think that if they didn't sell dog food at all, it would just be a little bit more easier to take their sort of unbiased opinion, so but I don't want to get you in trouble, so I won't ask you a comment on that.
No, it's no, vets, they're so busy. they're so busy, and obviously nutrition, unless they're specializing in that area, it's such a small section of their course. Even as a vet nurse, with my training, the nutrition was so small. Most of it was on anatomy and physiology. So yeah, I had to do my own research. It took over my life, still does. But yeah, when it comes to being in practice, you have all these commercial brands that give you perks for joining their sort of basically selling their food. You get all your free webinars where they come in and they'll give you CPD, and you get Domino's for lunch for doing that conveniently, which we all enjoy. But
I'd be all in. That's it. I'm selling whatever.
yeah. But yeah, it's obviously they're gonna listen to those because they put the scientific on there and state that they are science based, and they will listen to them because they haven't got time to go and do their own research. But those that have specialised in nutrition, which is quite a minimal amount of vets really.
Yeah.
If you looked on the like nutritionists, there's not many at all that have specialised in it, because they want to specialise in other things that are part of like medicine or orthopedics or surgical, but yeah, I think unless you're wanting and genuinely interested in nutrition, it's always going to be just, we'll listen to that brand.
And you know what? One of the main ones that still blows my mind, that we're in 2024 and there's vets still out there recommending Chappy. Like, it's it's like
upset tummy.
Oh,
chicken and rice Chappy.
Give it Chappy, and you're like, what? It's like, like really? Like, we're in 2024 and you're still recommending Chappy. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like every pet shop's got to have Chappy in case the local vets recommended it, because... And that should tell you everything you need to know, in my opinion. I'm not even gonna dive into that because I find it so absurd, to be honest. But yeah. No. Yeah. You've been amazing, Michelle. I really appreciate you doing this. And
thank you.
I've definitely learned from you. And honestly, yeah, if anyone wants to contact you, your details on the RFVS website, right? So
yes, yeah.
So yeah, anyone who wants to contact Michelle, get knowledge, that's where you can get a hold of her. And yeah, you've been amazing. Thanks a million.
Thank you very much.